So last night, after completely destroying my diet plan at the Super Golden Buffet in Duluth, Georgia, which you guys might need to check out if you're in the Atlanta area at some point. All you can eat crab legs, shrimp, chicken wings, made to order hibachi, steamed corn and potatoes, crawfish. Yeah, it was crazy. But after leaving there and we end up going to the mall and trying to walk it off, we end up coming back to the house. And usually when I'm at the house and I'm having some downtime, I'm scrolling through YouTube. And while I was scrolling through YouTube, I found a very dope video made by a smaller YouTuber, and it is called Why Are Recording Studios Still Closing? Hence, that's why I'm doing this video right now. Then I seen a whole bunch of reaction videos to it as well. But one thing I like to do is, if I'm doing a reaction video to somebody else's video, I want to make sure and give a shout out to the person who actually created the video. The name of the channel is Recording Software Tutorials. He's a smaller YouTube channel, but you guys need to go over there, check him out, and in the comment section, let him know Bolo sent you. And let's go ahead and support some of these smaller channels so everybody can eat from the YouTube pie.
Bolo!
Now, the brother made some really cool points. He had some really good stuff to say in the video, which, like I said before, you should go to his page and watch it. I didn't want to do one of the ones where I'm watching it and stopping it and giving my insight on it. I just wanted to go ahead and just piggyback from what he was saying. Now, he did bring up a lot of cool points, but I want to add a few things that I noticed as well. Now, if you guys do know or don't know, I've been doing this music thing since the year 2000. So I've been here at the beginning of the whole software movement, at the end of the analog movement, and I've just been growing with this whole thing for all of this time. Now, one thing I did notice is, of course, the obvious situations is a lot of the software and a lot of the stuff that we use is cheaper and it is much better. So now we actually have audio interfaces that cost like $100 to $150 that sound just as good as the really expensive interfaces back in the day that used to cost like $10,000. So yes, the obvious things are all the recording tools that we have right now are much cheaper and consumers can buy it. So that's one downfall of major studios is we can actually go ahead, buy the software, buy the tools we need, and we can just record at home for much cheaper than to go out and pay $150, $200, $300 that were the prices back in the day. Now, there were some people in this comment section that was like, yo, who would pay $300 for a studio session? And I'm here to tell you guys right now that they were paying that. That was a thing to pay that amount of money because during that time, it just wasn't just walking into the studio and paying for the studio. Like right now, it is so relaxed in a lot of these studios where you walk into them and it's like an engineer may come in, an engineer might not come in. Well, back in the day, it's a little bit different because a lot of times they were recording on tape. And if you were recording on tape, it required a setup time and a prep time before you even came into the studio. You had to turn on equipment, make sure it was warm enough, and at that time you had to bring your own tape or you had to buy tape at the studio to even get started because the digital age wasn't really even here like it is now. And if you guys know about tape back in the day, that tape was not cheap. And you had to know how to utilize the tape as well. You know, you might have to stack a few songs on there so you wouldn't have to go ahead and buy some more tape. That's where you hear some of these stories of these engineers getting kind of beat up in the studio because they might have did something and it might have recorded too much on the tape or it might have messed up the sync of the tape. It's a lot of stuff going on. I know you heard a lot of the stories about the death row stories about engineers getting beat up, but I'm telling you guys right now, there was sometimes a good reason. And if some of you older producers that know about tape, y'all can chime in and let them know in the comment section about syncing tape, especially when it got out of sync. But yeah, that was an actual thing. But then once people started noticing that they could just go ahead and just buy the stuff and record at their cribs, of course, recording studios started losing money. People started going other places. And then not only was the equipment getting cheaper, the plugins started getting cheaper. And, you know, the main reason why they were getting cheaper because people were, you know, downloading the plugins because, you know, back in the day, you know, Waves was very expensive. Like to get one Waves plugin back in the day was going to run you $200 or $300. Waves plugins used to be very expensive back in the day, like very expensive. I don't know if you can go back and check, but they were pretty expensive. Now, you have to understand, I was a studio owner as well, okay? I was owning my own spot since basically 2001. Once I had a studio in my apartment, I ran that out of my own apartment, which was kind of dangerous. And then when I got to Florida, I actually built a shed in the back of my dad's house. I ran that from 2005 to 2007. And then I moved to Atlanta, and I had a recording studio ever since. I've always had a recording studio here. I think it was maybe like 1 or 2 years where I didn't have my own personal spot. But other than that, I've always had a recording studio even to this day. And what I can say about being a studio owner is I had a lot of clientele, and I still get requests for a lot of people to come in right now. The one thing I can say is that even though we are dealing with some of the highest inflation right now, the prices have been pretty steady over the years. Pretty much what they were charging in 2007 is what they are charging right now. Maybe $20 to $30 more, but it's not much more than around 2007, because I know back then there were some studios that were charging $50 to $75 for some of their smaller rooms, and then for some of the big rooms it was like $100 to about $175 for the big rooms, and that is on average. There were some studios that were charging more, there was a lot of studios charging less, but on average for some of the bigger studios, they were averaging around about that price. You know, the smaller rooms were pretty much going pretty cheap at that time if you got multiple hours. Now, if you're only doing like an hour or two, they would kind of get you a little bit. I ain't gonna lie. But one major shift that a lot of people I've seen in these videos are not talking about is the recession. Late 2008 to about mid 2013 was rough for a lot of people, especially for a lot of Americans. I don't know how it was worldwide, but I know here in America, it was rough. A lot of people were losing jobs. A lot of people were not going out anymore. A lot of people were not going and buying stuff out of stores because people didn't have that much money. And a lot of places shut down, not just studios, but just a lot of businesses, period, shut down. And I seen it happen. My first studio was 2 blocks away from Underground Atlanta. And if you guys know about Underground Atlanta, pre-recession, that thing was jumping. Like from Wednesday night all the way to Monday night, that thing was jumping, okay? It was always a lot of traffic there on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And then there was daily traffic there all through Peachtree Street from Martin Luther King all the way up through Marietta, where the bus station, where they had like all of like kind of like the flea market type stuff over there. Then you had the underground, you had the food court. It was always a bustling situation there. But slowly but surely, when the recession hit, one store started closing. Then this store started closing. Then this store started closing. And then round about like 2011, it was like a ghost town down there. And I started noticing other studios around the area, they were closing as well because you still had to pay a lot of rent. Now, some of the places actually lowered their rent a little bit to kind of accommodate for what was going on, but even people still could not keep up with their rent because nobody really had money. A lot of these artists were working, and even the people who were hustling, they were losing money because the people that was working, that they were buying, work from them, they didn't even make that much money because they didn't have no money. So it was a crazy situation at that time, and it was kind of dangerous too because a lot of people were trying to take stuff at that time, man. And I thank God, man, I was covered because it was kind of crazy out there, downtown Atlanta and other places around the country, man, because people didn't have no money. And man, they'll get you. Yeah, but during that time, it was very bad. And we still, to this day, have not fully recovered from that recession, okay? People think we have, but if you notice, a lot of places during the recession are still ghost towns to this day. Like, there's a lot of stuff being built up in other areas and stuff like that, but still in some parts of the country, once the recession ended, and all those places closed down, they still haven't really fully recovered from that. I can say 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and then 2019 hit. But between that time, from like 2013, mid 2013 to like, late 2019, before COVID hit, we were doing pretty good. You know, the housing market was down, things were cheaper, people started getting jobs. But then COVID hit. COVID hit, shut everything down again. So all of that momentum that was building up, and then you started seeing people, you know what I'm saying, during COVID, started getting a little bit of money and everything, you know what I'm saying? So people started getting some money. Well, you know, I don't know how they did it. You know, you do what you do. People started getting some money, and they were using the money to reinvest into studios and stuff like that and other things. But they were reinvesting into it, but people have not had enough money to sustain it. And then after about a year or two after the COVID money dried up, then boom, we're right back to where we were. Now, like I said before, in his videos, there was a lot of factors because, of course, during the early days, we used to use a lot of hardware. Then people started, you know, being able to buy the hardware. Consumers started buying hardware. And then people started setting up these smaller studios around places. And then a lot of artists were going to these smaller studios instead of going to these bigger studios because they had better rates. And then some of these artists who had deals that didn't want to use their advance money at the bigger studios, they would just record themselves and a lot of times build the label back. It was a lot of things that were going on, but I will say the recession and COVID really slowed down a lot of things. Now we're back in another rebuilding phase where you see some studios still trying to recover. Now, some studios still are kind of hanging on because a lot of them have been sold, but they kept the original name, so people still know about some of these studios. And then now there's these kind of like smaller studios that have popped up, and then they have some really good equipment, but they cater to artists who do not have the biggest budgets in the world, and then they can just go in there and do that. Now, some of the major studios, they have still hung on, and some of the huge major studios have totally just deceased. Now, not to say that there is not still the big mega studios, because now a lot of these mega studios are owned by mega stars or very rich people that are really pretty much privately owned. We got to look at studios like Marvel Studios. That thing is amazing. And then they have a whole bunch of studios overseas and even here in America that are new, that are pretty much privately owned, and they pretty much service out those studios to high-end clients, mostly movie type of stuff. But yes, the way how consumers can go ahead and get some of these high-end products, and how you can have a whole setup just like me here at my crib, and I have a whole setup at my studio downtown, that kind of hurt the recording industry. And with these artists who are like, yo, why am I going to spend, $100, $200 in the studio when I could just go ahead, get me a laptop, get me a cool interface, get me a decent mic, a Chaotica eyeball, and just record this while I'm on tour or while I'm at the crib. And then I can send it off to a mixing engineer. And then once they get done, they just send it off to a mastering engineer. And then they can handle everything for me like that instead of me going to a studio, which I get because, like I said before, I was one of those people who had a smaller studio and I was doing the same thing. So it just made more sense for me. And to just add a little ice on the cake, with this being a microwave society of music where music does not really have any longevity, a lot of artists are looking at it like, hey, all I need to do is do just enough for it to pop on IG, TikTok, or any other social media service, and I'm pretty much straight. So why am I spending all this money when I could just make something really quick, pop it up on IG, they're going to like it for a few weeks, and then I can just go ahead and just pop out another one from there. So with this being a microwave society, a lot of things are moving a lot faster, and real albums are not really being made. And then some people are looking at quantity over quality in a sense. So I want you guys to really think back to what happened during the recession and think back to what happened during COVID when everything was shut down. And you will see a big correlation between the two, because once everything shut down, the money stopped. And then once the money stopped, bills still had to be paid. And if you had a really big studio at that time and people were not coming in and paying in those studios, you had a problem. So let me know in the comments what you think is one of the reasons why a lot of studios were closing. And if you can, go ahead and go to recording software tutorials page. I'm going to have a link in the description so you guys can check out his video as well, because his video was the one that kind of started this whole thing. And show him some love and show him some support. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys learned something from it. And like I always say, Peace out.